Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are at the moment. Welcome to today's event. My name is Eduardo Chavez. I am the founder of ECM Consulting Group. Today's event is called Business Transformation Success, Integrating Business Process and IT Strategy. We'll explore the benefits of aligning business process management and technology strategy to improve liquidity, working capital, and ultimately transform the business. Today's speaker is Fari Assad. Fari is a seasoned transformation executive with over 20 years of experience working at the intersection of business and technology. Her industry experience includes life science, petrochemicals, and management consulting. Her most relevant skills include IT and business strategy alignment, business IT transformation, executive management, BPM, risk management, and mergers and acquisitions. ECM Consulting Group is known for helping corporations afflicted by underperforming quote to cash and source to pay processes to achieve dramatic improvement of key performance metrics like cash generation, profitability, and customer service. Before we start the interview, I'd like to highlight some economic effects that underscore the need for optimizing investments in technology and business processes. The chart on the left shows the amount of loans given to the private sector in the US. What is very interesting to show is that since January of 2023 onwards, the amount of loans have decreased month after month. While loans are becoming more scarce, if we now look at the right-hand side, the interest rate have going up steadily since the beginning of 2022. What this means is for corporations, it's definitely becoming more difficult to get loans, number one. And number two, if they get them, they are more expensive as a result of the interest rates that are going up. Given the current unexpected economic environment this year, I think corporations need to prioritize a cash culture. To this effect, companies need to shorten the cycle time from buying stuff, selling, and collecting sales. And to be able to accomplish this, the quote to cash and source to pay processes have to operate at their best from a people, a process, technology, data, and internal controls point of view. Fari will be sharing her experience and insights during the first 20 minutes or so, and the rest of the available time will be devoted to Q&A. I trust this sounds like a good plan for everybody, and without further ado, I will hand it over to Fari. Good morning, Fari. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Eduardo. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for joining today's show, and I am excited to spend the next 25 minutes or so with you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I have some prepared questions for you, and in the interest of time, I'm gonna be reviewing them with you. The first question I have for you is, can you tell the audience how has your career evolved to become a transformational executive?
Sure. I started my career in finance and accounting. In fact, that's what my degree is in, but fairly quickly pivoted into operations, business process management, and technology. But I really associate my transformation career based on some amazing cross-functional journeys that I had across business and technology that allowed me to get the necessary depth and breadth in a number of areas, ERM from a risk management, certainly depth in process excellence, and then the large scale program leadership and change assimilation. Some of these were across M&A, divestitures, and certainly technology and digitization. Throughout my learnings, it was very clear that while change is inevitable, business success is dependent on leaning into it. And I learned quickly that I do love change and see myself as a change agent. I've certainly made a lot of mistakes throughout my years, but learned fairly quickly that leading with that empathetic leadership and people centric lens, ultimately, it's the best way to converge business and technology strategy.
Thank you. Excellent career, by the way.
Thank you.
My next question is, why do the business and IT should be aligned to execute corporate strategy, Fari?
Sure, it's fairly simple, right? We want to solve the right problems at the right time with the right technology and ultimately with the right outcomes. And the way I approach this is the convergence. And what I mean about that, it's an alignment, it's an agreement of philosophy and approach across strategy, design through execution. And when I sit in the IT organization as the CIO or various other roles, the business partnering roles are best equipped and skilled to do this, as well as, of course, the CIO is a business partner in themselves. And it's about leaning in and understanding the business needs, the pain points through the stakeholders' lens, and then pulling through and translating that through technology and certainly influencing is a key factor. Where I've used BPM to achieve that as a great convergence strategy, it needs strong leadership alignment. And
Hmm.
typically, where I've seen it done really well is that partnership between the CIO and CFO helps drive significant value. Um, but in a nutshell, the importance of conversion is the ultimate business outcomes. Absence of that, you have a financial investment in some great technology that ends up being shelved as the users don't want to use it because ultimately it may not get embedded in their ways of working. And
Hmm.
Eduardo, perhaps I can share a couple examples
That
for
could be
the
great.
audience. So, one quick one, a global entity that was trying to embark on their digital journey, and it was a multi-business unit entity that I was part of. Um, one of the business units, the larger business unit, had started their journey and was very far along. And the objective from the IT side was to drive synergy, leveraging our platform strategy. We believe the platform investment could provide significant business outcomes um, and wins across the various functions. The problem, however, we were trying to solve was given the larger BU was further along, the smaller business unit was working independently within their own respective business unit. And what I mean by that, from a solve standpoint, it required a lot of influencing and, in fact,
Hmm.
three-dimensional conversations. And
Ah,
what I mean about that is a number of various pull-through strategies were needed to link the business messaging and connecting the dots, right? Going
hmm.
across the two business units, going deep within the business unit as they were working independently, locally, regionally, and globally, but also linking the connections around the business value cross-functionally. And
Okay.
ultimately, the outcome was positive because we were able to engage, influence, and shift the business strategy and really align it to the platform and drive synergistic value and business outcome.
Which platform are you referring to?
This was a CRM
Oh,
platform.
okay. Thank you
So,
for the
so
clarification.
Viva CRM has tremendous capabilities cross-functionally across the life science, and that's what we were seeking to achieve.
Oh, okay.
And then, the other example I was going to share is a smaller med tech company. And the problem we were trying to solve was high DSO and a lot of customer complaints, both on the front office as well as the back office. And through some BPM techniques, we leveraged some key technology to create a digital dashboard with drill down capabilities, real time, and really create that customer 360 lens. And the customer 360 lens equipped the sales team to have meaningful conversations with their
Hmm.
respective customers. And with that data, we were also able to get the necessary transparency, right, um, across commercial and finance to have shared performance measures for DSO. And
Okay.
while measuring that and serving that shared responsibility, we saw over time that DSO decreased. So it was a win-win in terms of, again, that convergence and sprinkling BPM in the midst of
Hmm.
all of that.
Perfect. Thank you. Um, Moving on to the next question, I believe you have already covered this, but uh, in regards to the convergence or alignment that you were referring before, is there anything else that you would like to add and eventually clarify further how BPM play comes into the equation, please?
Sure. Maybe just to enhance the conversation a bit. So the convergence of the business and technology strategy, in my experience, I've used two approaches. I've used, what I would call business capability framework, which is ultimately a methodology to integrate the overarching system of people, process, technology, and data by function, right? So a series of conversations to be able to analyze and assess those capabilities within each function as to whether they meet the needs of the business strategy across the different horizons, so
Hmm.
short, mid, and long term. And then the gap that's identified is really input into the technology strategy and the architecture and obviously the roadmap that gets executed. How I've used BPM in this, BPM, as you know, is really just a discipline, a method to discover, model, analyze, etc., how a process performs. And
Hmm.
foremost, it's a philosophy and mindset. I've used it to go deeper in terms of the process capability and assessing that in terms of what is that health.
Hmm.
But I would say if organizations are interested in launching into this area, it's really about stitching it into the fabric. And by that I mean, besides the mindset shift, there's
Hmm.
a little bit of investment organizationally. And when it's coupled with the CIO's responsibility,
Hmm.
you can easily fold it into the business partnering roles because again
Okay.
those roles are skilled to have the necessary conversation, but that's not to say that you can't have a separate org. I've seen it done very well that way as well. And Eduardo, maybe I can share a very specific example where I've seen it done extremely well, if that
It
helps.
sounds like a good plan, Fari.
Sure. An organization that I was part of early in my career, and I still look upon them very fondly as best in class. And we were about to embark on a journey, integrated ERP, CRM on a single platform. And the CEO added 1 year into the program, front loading it with an investment in BPM and established that structure. And that front loading equipped the organization with the business leader's knowledge in terms of what are the insights, what are the experiences, and the expectations by the various users cross functionally. And then it helped them best translate that with the technology team to shape and form and really scale the program exponentially. So, it was a win-win not only from a program rollout, but also post rollout and maintenance.
Okay, perfect. Just, I have a small technical glitch here. I am sorry.
Sure.
Thank you. And before we move on to the question I am showing at the moment, when you said investment in BPM, are we thinking of training systems? What do you have
Yes.
in mind?
Well, in that example that I shared, the CEO truly invested 1 year, not only training, but establishing the BPM organization.
Mm,
So these were process leaders that were trained, and their whole role was process management and being responsible for the end-to-end process. And then the technology integration through matrix management.
perfect. Thank you for the clarification. And the next question is about. We keep on talking about BPM for what reason or another, but in today's environment that is very competitive, how do you think a BPM can help organizations to reduce overhead and improve cash flow?
Yeah, sure. I think if it's embedded in the CIO's agenda with strong partnership from the CFO, there's tremendous value for both functions. For the IT organization, we've already discussed how the convergence helps. But additionally, it helps deployment ease, right? If you have a team that can drive the change assimilation, then you have great technology that's embedded in the ways of working and utilized, and that has value realization for the organization. But also, it helps digital enablement, right? When you have standard harmonized processes, it can accelerate the digitization. And then lastly, for the IT organization, process governance, I have found helps streamline cost, because ultimately, if you're looking to govern changes from an end-to-end lens, right, not only IT changes, but the intersection of business and IT changes, and manage
Mhm.
those dependencies, you're minimizing broader impact and cost for the organization. And then the CFO value is easy, because you are working on realizing the value of that technology um, based on the changes that have been assimilated into the ways of working. So users are using it, and your investment is realized. But certainly there's process compliance, which ultimately
Mhm.
mitigates risks. And if you're using standard processes, your customizations are minimized. So that also takes cost out of the organization.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is how do you determine which processes are most critical for a company? And once do you determine which ones are more critical, how do you prioritize them in terms
Sure.
of what should be improved first?
Maybe three different approaches I would recommend. The first one, again, we've discussed, which is the convergence of the strategies,
Hmm.
and in that exercise through a business capability framework. But the second approach, every organization has stakeholders that they serve, whether it's customers, the employee engagement, or partners they collaborate with, coupled with, sort of focusing on core processes that are running a business. And what I mean by that is these are typically enabled by an ERP, as an example, or a CRM.
Hmm.
So if you look at a manufacturing organization, it's your typical plan to stock, procure to pay, order to cash. And often enough, these processes can be leaned out through automation and technology. And that way you can easily take costs out using RPA and various use cases to
Hmm.
automate, invoice processing, bank reconciliation, and things of that sort. So That's one approach. And then certainly for organizations that maybe are not as further along in their maturity, you might want to tackle it in an area that has leadership alignment. Maybe it's a sub
Hmm.
function or a sub process, and that could get you quick win to be able to share across the rest of the organization to have a more methodical way to approach it. But I always leverage data in the prioritization. So it could be process KPIs, right? Critical to successes. Or
Hmm.
it could be using technology. So process mining tools, and there's many of them out there that I'm sure the audience is aware, like Eris and UiPath,
Hmm.
etc. These have a digital footprint and they integrate into these platforms, these enterprise platforms, and embed themselves within the transactional process. And easily you can see the data outcomes. They identify, bottlenecks, defects, and process steps that might be manual outside the system. So again, that data is enlightening because then you can easily prioritize where you get the
Hmm.
biggest win and value.
If I understand correctly, process mining probably would be a good tool to analyze the data, right?
Absolutely. And identify where you want to drive the prioritization, because then easily you can quantify it. You can determine by eliminating steps or automating what is the value the organization will gain, either in reducing lead time or process effectivity or cost.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is, in your experience, have you had previous employers or clients that were struggling with their business processes? Can you give us an idea what those problems were and how do you approach them?
Sure, I can share a couple examples. One is a finance example where um, the finance organization at a global entity reached out, and we were observing ongoing repeat technology failures. And it was specifically in the area of invoice payment processing, coupled with the vendor master onboarding. And with some BPM techniques and looking at it more closely, the root cause ultimately was people and process that were affecting technology failures. And it was, it was your typical use case of the vendor master having, data quality, data accuracy issues associated with it, and ensuring from a governance framework, right? We put the responsibility where it best sit, and also lean out the process handoffs, making sure appropriate and accurate input into that
Mhm.
onboarding process, and at the end of the day, data stewardship, and that in itself helped take lead time to a much more lower amount of time, and helped the invoice payment processing to be more effective.
Perfect. I have a question here from one of the viewers. I'm going to read the question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned the usage of automation with the new artificial intelligence era. What changes do you see IT making in their processes to support the business transformation process?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, we're seeing AI left and right everywhere. In fact, a current client of mine I'm working with in the clinical decision support, and it's amazing where AI is popping up, even on clinical decision making. But to get to the question, um, I would see, there's many ways that IT can use AI to streamline. In fact, at one company, we leveraged it in our help desk and to automate support services, as well as
Mhm.
testing automation. Um, but foremost, I think it's really important as IT leaders that we also consider that the risk that AI introduces, and really are mindful of how we can mitigate any potential risks. So I see those two areas as certainly key: value as well as risk mitigation.
Okay, perfect. We have a few minutes left, and I just want to open the floor for anybody who wants to ask any additional question. So this is a good time if you have questions. I don't see anything coming yet, but in any case, Fari, can you maybe give us some closing remarks or any additional piece of advice that you think the audience should take into account in terms of aligning IT and the business as you have been telling us all along?
No, I mean, I think it's really important for that partnership between IT and finance, because ultimately you can identify very quick wins through that collaboration that you can drive saving. Right? It's back to what are the problems to solve, right? Identifying the right problems that you can invest the organization's time and resources that can get the right quantifiable value, right? And truly measuring that, right? So you know exactly what you're going after. What is
Mhm.
the impact of the problem to the organization? Measuring that up front, and then how you're going to fix it through, these technology tools. That will be really impactful, and getting that alignment as to what to work on first is key.
Okay. And my last question before we wrap up today's podcast. In your experience, what are some of the typical common mistakes companies make when they are trying to implement a new technology?
Yeah, I mean, a few that I have experienced, not leading with that BPM mindset and just throwing technology and thinking you're going to solve the problem. Um, what it ends up being is great technology that gets shelved. And I've seen this time and time again that then afterwards, organizations are trying to reap the benefits of BPM and introduce it once the technology has gone live. And quite frankly, it's more challenging, is what I've seen. So,
Mhm.
that would be an advice that I would suggest. And then, post go live, the other advice that I have is it's really important to establish that governance model post implementation to make sure whatever the technology and the business capability that has been developed is
Mhm.
maintained, is managed. And, BPM is a great way to do that. But, obviously through data decision making.
Excellent. Well put, Fari. And I have one question that just came in. The question reads: are there any best practices recommended surveys that can help you measure success after the transformation process?
Yes. Where I have found value is really quantifying and qualifying the problem that you're trying to solve with some KPIs and measuring that baseline. Because only afterwards, once you got your baseline, you can determine if you were successful. So that would be, I think, the most important thing, because you can then demonstrate value.
Okay, perfect. All right. We are just about to run out of time, and I don't want to conclude this podcast, Fari, without thank you so much for having shared your time with all of us. It's been very insightful to learn or to expand our knowledge about why it's important to work the business and IT as a team, which is very important. Sometimes doesn't happen in all companies. But as I said, thank you so much for your time, and I hope I can see you back in the future in this podcast.
Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you everybody for joining today's event, and have a good day. Bye bye.